at the risk of getting in trouble with the other workshop that's happening now, I want your mobile phones out. Okay, there's no pouches, there's no nothing, you're going to need your phone because you're not allowed to sit there. So you're going to be doing a little bit of work on the phone as we go through this. And hopefully to everyone else who's online, you can do the very same thing. So it's a way of interacting with us. So my name is Billy Redmond. I've been the principal of North Wicklow Educate Together. This is my 5th year. Before that I was principal of a faith-based school for 6 years. Prior to that I worked with the support services for about 12 years. And then I was a home ec teacher, the most important subject in the world. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at a couple of different things. We're going to look at the idea of inclusion. So we're going to talk a little bit about the perspective of what an inclusive school looks like, but quite specifically what I want to present to you is some of the work we've done around trying to find out what makes our school inclusive. I know I think it and I feel it and I want it to be, but how do we actually concretize it? How do we make it something real? So we asked a couple of simple questions to all our parents and to our students, and we pulled that information together. So the first thing we're going to do, there might be a little bit of me moving around here, is if you could scan that QR code. I feel so technologically gifted when I'm giving people QR codes, but honestly I don't know what's behind it, but it makes me feel like, you know, technologically advanced. So, when you open up that, and it'll be up again throughout the presentation, you're going to see this. Now it's a really simple Padlet that you're going to see when you open it up. Everything that I do today will be on that Padlet. The PowerPoint presentation is there. Just some extra information. But one of the first things I'm going to ask you to do is, do you see this here, this question, what do you expect of an inclusive school? And you see the little add comment there. Yeah. What I'd like you to do is to add a comment. Now you can take it from the perspective of the child that you have that is in school or has been in school, that's no problem. You can be a bit more global. What do you think parents in general expect of our schools? A sentence, a word, whatever you want. If you could take a moment, and you don't have to do it this right now, you can do it as we move through the presentation. You can have a think for yourself. Universal design would say, take your time. You don't need to do it the second I say you need to do it. Do it when you want to do it. But I might give you a time frame, you know, as in within the next hour. But it's a general. So I'll go back and we'll go in and out of that a little bit to show you just a couple of activities so you can kind of engage with it. So if I just go back to my presentation. So really what I'm hoping to do is to give you a sense of maybe what an inclusive school looks like, give you a little bit of perspective on what our school looks like. But I suppose I was really lucky because I worked in so many schools over the years with the support services. I've seen so many staff rooms. I've seen so many corridors. I'm fierce nosy. And we're in an old primary school that's being refurbished. We're a small school, we've only 350 kids. We can't get any bigger because we don't have the building. But when I come in a school, especially when I come in a school like here today, you have a nose. I'm nosy by nature, you have a nose and you see, am I represented or who's represented on the corridors? And even as you're walking out, you look at the corridors here, everybody is represented. Everybody. I've seen loads of rainbow flags, my community, and we're represented, and I can see it, and I can feel it. I saw a radio station, which I'm fierce jealous about. How? I need to work out to get one of them. But again, you can see representation, and representation is important in inclusion. We'll be talking a little bit around UDN, and UDN is not a new concept. UDN is a very, very simple idea that says, when you're starting something, think of everyone. And throw in a few choices. That's it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through the session as well. We remember that inclusion is one of those nebulous topics that can be very annoying. It's a bit like in schools, and it's a word I don't like, is the word respect. I'm not a big fan of it, but we use it because I think it's very abstract. Because you have to think, what does it look like? When a parent comes into me in school and they are angry and annoyed and not happy with me, what does it look like when I'm respectful to them? How does it sound but it has to be tangible, and that can be hard work. You know, parents are amazing, but like us as teachers, we can all be hard work. But it's about learning how do we listen, and an inclusive school tries to listen, but it's everywhere. It's in our school self-evaluation, it's in our support with the NCSE and NEPs, it's in the way we engage with our student support teams and our AEN, it's in student voice and student participation, it's everywhere. It is not a gift. And that's the big shift. Inclusion isn't a gift that we give children, it's their right, and it's what we're paid to do. The reason we get a salary is to ensure that we are, I'll never do it perfectly. And I have long stopped trying. My goal, and the goal of our staff in our school, is to, are we giving it really our best? Are we turning up every single stone? Are we being persistent and determined in our attempt? Not necessarily the solution isn't always going to work. And so what I'd like you to do now, if you haven't done it already, I'd like you to take a moment just to write a sentence on what you think an inclusive school looks like. And when you notice, for example, closed captions are on my presentations. It's standard practice in our classrooms, in our school. Every single teacher must use closed captions. Doesn't matter whether you're using a PowerPoint, it's irrelevant. You can turn on a blank PowerPoint slide and as closed captions are running underneath you constantly. 10% of my student population is Ukrainian. They need everything translated for them. But kids can do that translation themselves. So how does inclusion look like for my parents where English is not their first language? And like we've recently really started to use universal design for learning to pull our policies apart. Like we got rid of our additional educational needs policy, we don't have one anymore, we have a continuum of support policy. And then when we spent a year working on that, making sure our policy looked like our practice and was reflected in the NCSE's guidelines, and all of that was in line. And then we had this beautiful 25-page policy. And then again UDL, which has created this constant question in my school, in everybody in my school's head, where's the barrier? Where's the barrier? Where's the barrier? So I'm looking at that policy and I'm saying, where's the barriers for that policy to be accessible to the kids and the parents in the school? Now we have a video of the policy, we have a summary of the policy, we have an infographic of the policy. So we've converted the policy into different forms so it's more accessible. But we would never have done that without UDL. Because UDL keeps asking us those fundamental questions. And again, you can add back into that. But what I'd like to show you now is when we asked our students and our parents, and I have, like any good home economics teacher, here's one I made earlier. I'll just pass those down there. If you just want to take one each, and again, you can take, it's available on the Padlet anyway, so you don't necessarily need to take one. You might want to be sustainable and not want the page, I don't mind, whatever. But there's a version of that. But basically, we asked our school community, I went around to all the students, and I said, I just want 3 words to describe what school is like. And maybe if there's not enough in my chair, I have some extras here that don't have maybe the narrative on it. But then we asked our parents, what do you like about our school? What are we doing well and effective? And we took all that information and we dual-coded it. I won't lie, I love a bit of AI. Love a bit of AI, oh, love a bit of AI to take all your information, put it into the AI machine, and the AI machine dual-codes it and gives you back really meaningful information where you can go, well, what's the theme? And what was interesting when we did it with the students and we did it with the parents, the very same answers came up, slightly different language, but they spoke about these 6 areas. And this is just from what the parents and the students said. They spoke about an inclusivity and support for diverse needs. They spoke about a sense of community and belonging, going back to what Sean was talking about. Belonging. Belonging comes back to the idea of Maslow. If I'm not secure and safe, I can't belong. If I don't belong, I'm not going to achieve. And I'm not going to self-actualize. So that sense of community and belonging, positive relationships and approachability to all staff. I own my bias, I'm Educate Together principal. You know, I would see massive value to no one calling me sir anymore, and I'm just Billy. It doesn't take away any element of my authority. What it does is it makes that bit a little bit easier. I'm not saying the very same relationships don't happen in more traditional forms of schools where you're sir and miss. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it maybe it's a little bit quicker for me. Just some of those traditional barriers I don't necessarily have to navigate. Holistic and child-centered education, communication and accessibility. How do we communicate with our parents? How are our parents communicating with us? You know, and I just as often hear it from the parents. You'll be shocked to hear this. I just as often hear, I never saw that. I was on the app. I put a notice up on the app. No, I didn't get that one. No, it goes to every phone. You know, we have to navigate how we communicate with each other. You know, and even with teachers, we have a phone call. Sometimes when you get caught away with your computer and you've had a few, cups of tea and you're fed and you're in the evening and you're annoyed, or we send emails very quickly. So it's all about thinking and looking at how we encounter parents and how parents encounter us is really important in that inclusive space. And in the information I've given out, and it's up on the Padlet, you'll see quotes from the parents, what they said that backed up that idea. And it's really just to get a sense of, when we look at inclusion, from a school's perspective, from a parent's perspective, what does it look like? Because fundamentally, this is our job as a school community. Every single thing I do around all of my work in school is around making sure that the continuum of support is living and active in our school. And that's all coming from the support and the resources we get from the NCSE and the department. And support for all is where we housed, firstly and primarily, universal design for learning. So for every one of the, let's say 60 first years coming into me in September, for every single one of them, they get everything. They get all the school policies, all the teachers, all the guidance counsellors, all the well-being programs, everything. They get everything. But some kids, that won't be enough. Some kids will need a bit more than that. And it depends on where the lift is, or what the barrier is. What barrier do I need to remove? Is it around access to words, numbers, people, friendships? What is it around access to? How do I lift the barrier? For some kids, I just need to lift the barrier enough that they're able to navigate it. That's all they need, like a pedagogical equivalent of an antibiotic. Short, sharp intervention, lift them up a little bit, bring up the reading age. Sometimes that's all they need. Some kids need a little bit more ongoing support. A few kids need hand-holding, metaphorically and literally, the whole way through school, and that's absolutely fine. The challenge for parents is the system has changed, rightly so, and it's a better system. You no longer get to ring me and say, where's my hour and 25 minutes? My child gets an hour and 25 minutes because they're dyslexic. Where's my hour? That approach to a diagnosis following resources is gone, which is important. Now I have to keep cutting up the cake. So depending on who I have in the school, I have to match my resources to the needs of the school, which means I need to be identifying need. So for an inclusive school, that identification of the need and the tension between that thing and you wanting your child's needs met, and the space that exists between the two of those are where a lot of the opportunities and challenges exist around inclusion. Because I know what you want and I want to be able to give it to your child, but I also know what I have. And I have to make decisions. And that's one of the biggest challenges for school teams, is to understand we are not thinking of your child. We are thinking of your child in the context of the needs of an entire year group or an entire school. And decisions have to be made, and that's why it is so complex. And it also looks at academic and emotional and behavioural. And in our school, we're currently in the middle of reviewing our code of behaviour, and we are actually couching our entire code of behaviour around universal design for learning. Because there are multiple ways to engage, to represent, and to express our behaviour. And how do we do that in a really meaningful way, while at the same time using the language of barriers? And that language of barriers has been hugely helpful for us as a school. Now we're 5 years, we're in our 5th year of using universal design for learning. And I think we've only got the tipping point now. It's only now, in last year and this year, but especially this year, it's just something's happened where tipping point has been reached, enough people are talking about it, enough of the time, in enough of a way that it's become a framework that they engage with. They're still doing what they do, but they just do it through a different lens. Because we are doing in every single school, every primary school, every secondary school in the country, every special school, identify need, meet need, monitor and record. That's what we're doing. And the identify need and the monitor and record need takes time. It is hard work and there's a lot of effort involved. And when you look at the range of needs, I only put this up as an example, but the golden little shape in the middle, if there's a maths teacher in the room, is there a name for that? A spider diagram? Or
yeah.
It's a spider diagram. Internet, I knew what it was. So when we look at the range of need across Ireland, and we look at the purple, that's the range, or the gold in the middle is the range of need in the country. The purple is the range of need in my school. So we would have 50% of our student population with a diagnosis, we'd have 1 in 6 of our student population that are autistic. So we would have a very diverse population, and none of that has any correlation to IQ or cognitive ability. None of it. The assumption that a child with a diagnosis is in some way less able is again part of the challenge that we have with inclusion. There's no correlation between diagnosis and IQ, or very rarely there is a correlation. You can have exceptionally bright children with a diagnosis, and you can have exceptionally weak children with a diagnosis or without a diagnosis. They're not necessarily the same. But when I look at our results, and this was just the year before last, we were looking at it, the last year Leaving Cert results, we're in the middle of doing it again now. The purple line is ourselves and the golden line is the national averages. So I know we're performing relative to, we have a hugely disproportionately high need of kids with a diagnosis or kids with an identified need, but we know that we're performing in line with expectations, and we would argue that that's hugely because we're using universal design for learning. And part of our targets this year is increasing the literacy of our students around universal design. Teaching our kids to be able to say, no, I want to do that differently. Now we're educated together, so our kids don't really have a problem telling us what they want. They're very vocal, which I love. But part of it is just to give that a little bit of direction. But really, universal design for learning came from universal design for building. If you're building a school, build a school so it meets the needs of every child that might eventually come into the school. And one of the best examples, I did a bit of work with Global Schoolroom a couple of years ago, and I was working on the Starford project in Ghana, and I went to visit a school literally in the middle of nowhere. And very difficult to get to. They were building a school, it was a 6-room school, they had to build everything on site because they couldn't get any vehicles down anywhere near it. So they were making the blocks and everything else, and there was this 6-room school, 3 rooms downstairs, 3 rooms upstairs, with kind of a terrace on them. And beside the school was this huge ramp. Now, I mean, the ramp was half the width of this room, and it went up the side of the building. And the work that would have been put involved in getting that ramp together, because even the mud and the blocks and making it, they had to make every block. And I asked the principal at the time, I said, what's the ramp for? He says, in case one of our children uses a wheelchair. And I said, but do you have any children right now who use a wheelchair? No. And I thought, now that's a very loud example of what inclusion looks like. Because it actually would have took nearly as much work to build a ramp as it took to build a school. But the commitment to, and sometimes it's about the schools, when every school I've ever been into has a commitment for inclusion. It might look different. And part of our job is to help navigate what does it look like in our context. Because really what we're asking ourselves, and as parents I'm going to ask you a little bit of another activity now to think about choice with your own kids, is we ask, what are we currently doing? How do we understand what UDL is, and how do we create a kind of an action plan around that? So back to the Padlet for a second. And what I want you to do is, I want you to think about, now again you can talk about in the context of your own child with no names, and anyone who's online, I'd appreciate it if you were able to do it as well, because this is actually, this I'm being very cheeky now, this is going to be hugely useful in our own work, because it's asking the question, where do you use choice and flexibility with your own child? And you use choice and flexibility all the time. Every single parent I've ever met is using universal design in their kitchen every night. What do you want for your dinner? If you go over to, you see?
It's activity 2.
It's activity 2, there it is in a few private comments there. Every single parent is using universal design. There's 7 dinners being made in households of an evening. Worse, they're being given menus. What would you like? What's there? There's discussion. That's universal design. We are using universal design, and fundamentally universal design is talking about choice. So where do you have to adapt and be flexible with your own child or children you know or you've been involved with? Thinking about choice and flexibility in activity, in timekeeping, in movement around the house, in clothing. Like, clothing can be one of the most profound barriers to students ever accessing education. Something as fundamental as forcing kids to wear leather shoes. For some kids, it is fundamentally impossible for them to have that leather on their feet. We'll see a lot with neurotypical and neurodivergent kids that have huge feet sensitivity. And even something as simple as that, that can be such a big barrier that it is nothing to anybody else. It's irrelevant. And what's a barrier to me isn't necessarily going to be a barrier to anybody else, and just because it's a barrier to me, there's no judgment in that. So I like the language of barriers as opposed to things like the language of a stressor, because the language of a barrier is external to the child. The child's not the problem here. The barrier is the problem. There's nothing wrong with the kid. So it's how do we flip that and how do we become more aware of the barrier. So any examples, and I'll throw up the examples with any examples you have, or as we go through this piece that you could think about. And there's UDL in one slide. And UDL, even how we present information. It says that there are 3 basic levels with Universal Design for Learning. There are multiple ways to engage kids in learning. Multiple ways. Now that doesn't mean the start of my class is very exciting. I have 5 minutes now and I'm getting you engaged. That's not what it's talking about. When we talk about the role of the SNA in schools as an example, I have 13 SNAs in our school. Amazing team, do amazing work. We had a brilliant SNA celebration day, National SNA Appreciation Day. And one of the things I did there was I walked around and I gave all the kids a questionnaire and I asked them, in what way did the SNAs help them learn, and could they give us any nice memories of the SNAs? And literally within 10 minutes, I had 140 responses to a questionnaire from 300 kids. And we put all that information together in a series of posters and covered the school in the posters with all the comments. And it was really interesting to see. And then when I analysed all the answers they gave me, and I again did my AI thing with love it, right? And I asked to pick out themes from all the things the kids said. What were the areas? What were the key themes? We got this extraordinary representation of the work of the SNA in our schools. And all of those different subheadings, it gave me examples of the things the kids said. So I could really see what it looks like and feels like. But the SNAs go around in class and go, do you want a movement break? Quick movement break. That's engagement. Do you need help? Do you need help? That's engagement. Are you ready? Are you all right? That's engagement. Come on, good chat. Get going. I know you're a good time. That's engagement. Engagement is all the small little things we do to move them along. And you do it at home. You might call it cajoling at home. The professional language is engagement. You know, so if you want to professionalise your parenting, don't say you're cajoling, say I'm encouraging engagement. Representation is how we present the information. And representation is, especially in schools, we talk a lot about this. Like if I was giving a score on the slides this morning and today about how good they are with representation, you know, some of them were exceptional, some of them were very basic. Where UDL would say never have a slide with just text on it, ever. You must have a mix. If you're going to have it, there has to be visual text, there has to be a visual representation, ideally add additional information on it. And again, keep the text simple. Text where, you know, and I have a colleague and she's spectacular. Martina, if you're watching, I'm talking about you. Amazing, but it's like trying to get into the Guinness Book of World Records. How many words can I get on the one slide? Right? And then I'd see her up at the board like this, reading her own slide. I said, Martina, no one can read that if you can't read it when you're at the board. She's like, no, but I just love getting on the one page. I said, yeah, no, I understand that, you know, but it's how much text and information we put in, how we allow the child to navigate the information that's in front of us. Also the idea of note-taking versus note-making. Like that, we had an in-service day recently with our full staff on assessment in Universal Design for Learning, and one of the activities we did first, and it was really successful, was we had a little bit of competition. Where I said at the beginning, I gave everyone an A3 page, and I said for the next 2 hours, an hour with me and an hour with Fiona, our deputy, who's far better than I am. So I went first, so I didn't have to follow her. And I gave them all an A3 page, and I said, you're going to make notes for the next 2 hours. I said, whatever way you want to make notes, I said, I'll guide you. So I'll give you ways that you can break up your notes if you want. I'll give you a couple of shapes, but everyone make notes. And there's a prize here for the best note maker in the room. And there was a bottle of bubbly in it and some face products. I put money into it now. There was 70 quid in that bag, right? Well, there was a level of competition that started in that staff room. Suddenly there was complaints about, no one told us I don't have any colours. Right, and there was highlighters coming out, and there was, you know, And anyway, we went through the 2 hours and all the teachers took their notes, and then I gave them all a red dot. I said, now you're going to go around the room and you're going to look at everyone's notes, and I want you to give your red dot to the notes you think are the best representation of this morning. Not the tidiest notes, not the notes that have the neatest layout or whatever else. The goal was to get 60 people to see that every single one's page was different. And that's okay. The idea that everybody is taking their notes off a board and creating exactly the same thing in their copy is utter nonsense. Nonsense, and a complete waste of time. If you want them all to have your notes, email them to them. And then work on them. But the note making is where the learning happens. It's the construction of the note. It's like one of the teachers, and I actually took copies of everything, but one of the teachers had the notes all on one side of a page, and on the other side of a page she just had the word brain space. She said, I just wanted white space that I could just think about what I might like to put there. But even all of that, even looking at the notes tells me how the child is thinking. The way they're laying out information, all of that. So if you have an inherent need to be tidy, manage it yourself. Don't try and transfer it onto your child. Let them have, everyone doesn't need a ruler. Now I'm the one who loves a ruler, she used to love a ruler in Excel, but I'm just saying everyone doesn't need a ruler. And then we have to move away from the idea that this is learning. This is what learning looks like now. Everyone gets the same dinner. Leave inserts in front of you. So I don't care what you want to learn, everyone's getting the same dinner, but I don't like gravy. Don't care, it's on the syllabus. Everyone's getting gravy. It's about moving away from that idea, because all of that puts all the pressure on the teacher, and it is exhausting. Trying to give everyone the same plate of food. And what we need to do, Universal Design for Learning would say, we have to move to a buffet. You know, we all love a buffet, breakfast buffet this morning. Lord, I love a buffet, and you think about how much you're going to put, where you're going to put everything. It's all choice. It's all choice. And it's not about, no teacher can have that level of a buffet in their classroom. You're joking with me. Not a hope. But what we can do is use choice. What we can do is A or B. And it actually takes no more than that. Just the word or can disconnect a child from a barrier instantly. A or B. This or that. Try it. Allowing them to be at different places in it. Because when we think about providing a small, now it could be simply, there's 2 ways to look at the value of proteins in food. There's a 1-page written article and there's a 2-minute video. Do whichever one you want, I don't mind. That's all I'm talking about. It's not massive range of choice, it's about a little bit of choice. But then we also have to think about, well, if I'm coming into class and everyone has their empty plate and I'm saying these are my learning intentions and this is what we're going to learn, it's important I don't assume that everyone has the same plate. Because they don't have the same plate. Everyone has a different plate. Like my plate in maths or home economics was like, shit, biggest plate I could just bring it all on. I wish it was a little baby saucer from a doll's house. That was the size of my plate. Little tiny doll's saucer that I could hold August and Tall on the one plate. And I'd have to, if they wanted me to learn the 3rd word, I'd have to take August and Tall down to put on my 3rd word. Because my capacity in that was not high. My capacity in other subjects. And if you add to that capacity a diagnosis, this is where it gets complex. So, and then I even go further. I love to kill a metaphor. Then I'd even go further and say, well, what cookery am I using? Because they're the strategies I use to help you do the thing that I need you to do. Because if I have a small plate in maths class and I find it very hard, what techniques am I going to use with that child compared to the techniques with this child? And that's where amazing SEN work happens. Because that's when I am removing them, I'm removing them to build a skill that they go back into the classroom and use. Any withdrawal is all about using the skill back in the classroom better. So it's about trying to increase, because team teaching doesn't necessarily always do that, it can try. So really what you're doing is you're thinking about the child's plate, you're thinking about the tools that they're going to be able to use. You're also thinking about the level of choice they have, and a lot of kids, especially other neurodivergent children and young people, they will have a lot of the barriers removed at home because they've had to be. And they have routines and practices and ways of engaging with the world that are very appropriate for them so that they can get a barrier-free experience. And that's really important for them. It's our job in schools, and that's what inclusion is about. I am never in a million years going to be able to remove every barrier from every child. Not going to happen. But I can't look at the access to the information in my school and know that 60 children in my school have a diagnosis of dyslexia. Now, what are the most commonly used barrier lifting techniques for dyslexia? And I make sure every single teacher is at least doing that. Because what's good for one will generally lift all. You know, so it's about providing that bit of choice or that bit of flexibility. And really, when we think about multiple means of engagement, again, simple slides, simple amount of information, visual as well as narrative, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is varying the levels of challenge, providing choices, and the assumption sometimes is, if I give a child, there's 3 questions for homework, guys. Question 1 is really difficult, question 2 is not too bad, and question 3 is quite easy. I want you to pick one. It's the assumption they're all going to pick the easy one. They absolutely won't. They absolutely won't. And what you want to do is to be able to self-challenge. Now, the brighter child in that class will absolutely do all 3. Do all 3 just to show you they can. Knock yourself out, work away. Most important thing to do with bright children, get out of their way. Just get out of their way, make sure they don't, not too near the edges, and let them run on ahead. Go on ahead there, and I've left a couple of bits up there for you at the top of the room, away you go. And come back and help me if you can. Trying to manage that is not, and UDL, what's amazing about it is not for special ed. It's for everybody. It's just about providing choice. And I can think of some of the really exceptionally bright and gifted kids in 5th and 6th year in our place at the moment. And literally it's getting out of their way. They're just, you know, and as teachers we have to learn. I taught many brighter children than I am. You know, and I know, you know, where I am, and I know my mental and my capacity to do something. So I was amazed I could teach a child to get a H1 in home economics, but if you gave me the book, I wouldn't get one. I can teach them to do it, but actually my own capacity to sit down and do it in that way, in that format, isn't necessarily the same. So multiple means of engagement, and you do that at home all the time. But if you're not telling us what works for you in getting them engaged, you're the one who's the expert on these kids, so you need to make sure you're communicating with us. Multiple means of representation is just making sure that how I present information is not the same. It gets a bit boring. So I threw in an old Padlet there, gotcha? Get the phones out. It's about trying to represent the information in different ways. And multiple means of expression, for me this is the one that I love when schools start with this. When they change how kids are allowed to express their information. And it's interesting because I've been in this headspace for a long time, and recently I do a lot of supervision myself to make sure, you know, just to keep my head around my work and make sure I'm doing it properly. But with my supervisor about a month ago, we were talking about this, and I had this memory drop in my head of the day I was told I wasn't allowed to write with pencil anymore. I can remember that moment so clearly. I can remember going from 3rd class into 4th class. Loved my pencil, because I'm dyslexic. That pencil let me rub out my mistakes. That pencil let me make as many mistakes as I needed to make, and then I'd rub it out. And I'd write really light, so I'd learned how to rub it out so no one could see the amount of mistakes I was making. And when I went to pen, I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. And I just disconnected. I reduced the amount I wrote, I could see because I was not allowed to use my pencil anymore. And I get in an exam, you can't use a pencil. I still don't really get why. Anyway, the point being, moments like that, moments where choice is removed. And what difference would it have been? Oh, because it's a bit childlike now. This is going back 40 years. It's a bit childlike to be writing a pencil with 18. So it's about being in and being able to think. Like, fish don't have eyelashes, and they don't have lipstick. But does it matter if the information the child is presenting is giving us information? And how one child presents information versus look at the lovely rule that came out first, look at the rule and the lines and the numbers. And again, it doesn't matter what way we present information. The presentation is the demonstration of the thinking. That's what it is. I want to see work that looks different. I think the A4 page ruined part of the education system. How are you meant to ant on that little small square page? It's too small. Bigger page is much better, and the amazing thing about A2, folds in half and goes into a polygon. And everything's all right with the word. The state can be filed. And again, it's presenting different ways. It's being able to see and look at how we manage, how we ask them to express their learning. I mean, if I was to really pick a couple of issues I'd love to pull apart and get into a really awkward, difficult conversation about, I know John knows one of them is suspension, but the other one is homework. I think homework can destroy families. I think homework, the torture and the hardship, and the second you come in the door, the whole evening is spent talking about the bloody homework. And not an answer crack. Never a development happening at all, because all you're doing is talking about the spellings. And did you get the spellings done? Have you got this done? And it's no different at second level. Only at second level they just are not doing it. They'll have a teenage drop and they'll walk off. So it's looking at a bit of flexibility in homework can be very powerful. And also, certainly at second level, we have to be developmentally appropriate with homework. Giving kids that are 17 and 18 work to hand in tomorrow is just, it's like, it's how we're preparing them for college. Nobody in college is asking them to hand in anything tomorrow. Everything is done over a 2-week or a month period, so we need to build executive functioning skills. So we need to be saying at the end of 2 weeks you have to have these pieces of work done. Now you can be like me and have it done a week early in a folder ready and then tell me when I'm done. That was me in college. I was a torturer. I'd only have an assignment that would have to be done 2 weeks early. Have to be in a folder, done, completed. Then I'd enjoy the fact that everyone else was stressed. You know. Now again, I was sharing, but I did enjoy. I'd have to get done early. It would drive me out. My brain couldn't function if it was sitting looking at me. So when we provide just a little bit of flexibility with those areas, that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're going back and thinking. How do we, and you do this as a parent every minute of the day. How can I get them to engage in what I want them to do right now, or I need them to do right now? How do I represent what I want them to do right now? How am I asking them? What's the routine? How is it presented? And how are they getting to express what it is that and that becomes even more complex depending on the level of complexity for the child. So whether we've gone to a point where, like, when I think about how we engage with UDL when a child is non-verbal, and how do I make sure that they're able to express themselves in a meaningful way, they're the challenges that, they're possible, but they're still challenges that we face. And just before I just, any questions on those basic ideas? Do you get that singular concept of multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of expression? So for schools, it's not asking us to do anything differently, it's asking us to think differently about what we do. And that's the shift. The shift is, and that's like, it has transformed the way I respond to behaviour management in my school. Like the power of choice with behaviour management, it is unbelievable. Child is having a bit of a meltdown, and would you like to stay here and continue where you are right now? Would you like to go into an office and have some quiet time? Or would you like me to ring your mum and see if your mum can come in with you home? What would you like to do? And instantly, the very second I present the choice, their brain goes into that logical part of their brain. They plug in that analytical part of the brain, their emotionality comes down. I even improve it better if I throw in a few numbers. Oh, nothing like a number. The first thing we're going to do, the second thing we're going to, and the very second the brain hears numbers, it goes, comes right out of that emotional space and into that logic. And you can see the shoulders drop. Now you can't say count to 10, that's childish, that's not okay, that's not going to work. So you have to slip the numbers into a conversation. There's 4 things we're going to do. Or I have a few pages of my emergency numbers pages where I have boxes with numbers in them. I want you to write down 5 things that happened. Or write down the 5 people that annoyed you. Write them down. 1, 2, 3. Just that numerical piece. So it's techniques and strategies that will allow them to be able to express and to engage with the world. So if you could take a quick look, how am I doing on time?
You do plenty.
Okay.
We don't have to be down some course.
If you can have a quick look back at your Padlet, just so we have a little look. So when we look at some of the answers that you gave, just some of the examples. My child feels like they belong and that I feel as a parent welcomed. Welcomed is an important one, isn't it? You know, feeling welcomed. Being treated as an individual. No differentiation no matter what your physical or mental ability is, what gender you express, ethnicity, culture. And it brings up a really interesting conversation between what's the difference between UDL and differentiation. And it's an interesting one because differentiation has its value and it's hugely important and desperately needed in some situations depending on the child. But if I'm differentiating for you, Mary, if you don't mind, if I'm differentiating for Mary, I'm doing something that is very, very specific and I'm adapting something in a very specific way for Mary. Universal design allows Mary to adapt for herself. It allows Mary to decide what Mary needs. Does not mean I might still not need to differentiate as well, but the amount of differentiation that you need is drastically reduced with universal design. And where the differentiation becomes much more effective then is because you're targeting the differentiation to a very specific thing. Does that make sense? Whereas the old model, the old idea was said that every teacher is meant to meet the needs of every learner in your class. 50% of every single classroom in my school, 50% at least of the kids in that classroom will have a diagnosis. That teacher cannot have individual work planned for another 15 and then a shared lesson for another 15. That's not doable. So I have to give the kids the power to navigate that themselves. So I have to give them a little bit of choice. So when I come in to differentiate them, I'm doing something a bit more specific. We see things like every child in every class is considered in terms of learning needs, a place where you're valued. The help is there without having to ask. That's an important one, actually, not having to ask for help. But the flip of that as well, it's also important that we teach them how to ask for help. And that we normalise asking for help. And that can be a very powerful thing to do, is to normalise asking for help. And ask them to come in and solve it, because actually it gives the power back. And I think that was mentioned really well in this morning's session as well. It's about the question. Ask the right question, you'll get a much more productive answer. And it's all about, like we would use a lot of solution-focused techniques in our school, or we would try to do it, or we've done a lot of training of it in the past. And solution-focused techniques, it's all about the question. You know, and I will use them a lot in parent meetings. So I'll say, tell me when they're at their best, when they're at their shiniest. Tell me the last time you were proud of them. Shifts the dynamic completely. What does it look like when they're at their shiniest at home? You know when now I'm not saying it happens all the time, but you know when, God, just didn't I do a quite good job? You know when you have that moment as a parent, not that I know of, no kids, but when you have that moment as a parent, you go, oh God, I'm just doing that. I am knocking this out of the park. I am really good at this, because they're really good, right? What does that look like? But exactly it was said, as it was said this morning in the session, which I found really, really interesting, is if we don't name it, if we're not naming what we see, solution focus would say, name what you see or what you need. I need you to concentrate now, not I need you to stop talking. Telling a child what not to do. That's like me saying to you, do not have that glass of wine or that bottle of wine that's in the fridge now when you go home. Now you're all thinking, do I actually have a bottle of wine in the fridge? Is there one? Right? It's the inherent, don't do something. Well, maybe I bloody will then. Now I won't be told what to do. Teenagers, that's like that amplified. So you don't do that. What would be helpful? What would be useful? I find the best question I use as a school principal is, tell me what I can do to make things better right now. Tell me what I can do. Just leave me alone. Okay, that's not going to happen. Let's try something else. What else can I do? What else can I do? It's being open to change. And I think that idea of really making sure that we're thinking about all of those features of our environment. And then when we think about flexibility, you know, choice in ways to deal with the situation, get dressed under the duvet, get out, yeah, exactly. Meal times, trying to get them to eat the right food or where they eat the food, using things like iPads, providing choices for lunchbox. And again, it's when you realise the power of choice, because what it does is it stops the no. And every child is, I don't care whether they're 4 or whether they're 15. there is an inherent challenge to the no, and how we manage the no's and how we respond to the no's. I find Universal allows me to be a bit more flexible. Think, well, what choice can I give them right now? I can do A or B. Even if both choices are horrible, it doesn't matter. They are still making the choice. So the autonomy comes back to them. Their need to fight the individuation and separation element of adolescence, certainly at second level, gets dialed down a little bit as well. And they're not navigating that in as kind of a complex way. And later on, not now, but if there's anything that you found useful or interesting, you'd like more work, not now, but at any point later you want to click back into the panel or just go back to the PowerPoint just to finish it. But just I wanted to mention very quickly, we got involved in the partnership program. We were one of the first secondaries that got involved in the partnership program as well with the National Parents Council. We started it last year and got involved, and we found it really, really helpful. And I'll mention it in a second. But just overall, if I look at our work over the last 5 years on Universal Design for Learning, we would take those 5 themes. Implementing of the UDL training and really getting training to build our capacity to manage it. Peer observation and collaboration is a huge one. Every single teacher in school is observed and observes each other. They do at least 4 hours of observations a year. And that's a really, really important part of our UDL journey because they observe different elements of UDL and they give feedback to each other, and they really like that. We've integrated a lot with technology. We bought all the teachers new laptops, really good new laptops, because we needed increased spec to be able to do the things we want them to do and to use technology in a meaningful way. All our kids have laptops as well. Continuous CPD with our staff, and really focusing on assessment and inclusion. They were 2 big bits. How do we use universal design to make sure we're accessing and we're using assessment in a really meaningful way to gather information about a child's learning, which was hugely important for us. And again, going back to that simple concept at the beginning that came from the students and the parents. Inclusivity and support for diverse needs, but that diverse needs, some of those are episodic needs. Second and third year, I mean, primary school, I know primary school teachers, it is such a challenging job, and you're teaching them everything, and it's so complex trying to teach across maybe 3 or 4 different levels as well. But when we think about a broad range of needs in second level, it's just as complex, but just in a slightly different way. Because our challenges is around trying to get 6 teachers to do the same thing, or 8 teachers to do the same thing, and apply something in the same way, and present the same level of choice, so there's some similar experience with the students. That sense of community and belonging, those relationships, child-centered education, accessibility, and that individuality of expression. It can be a useful one for you to think about in the context of your own experience. Any questions? You can ask John questions too, but I don't know putting him on the spot. It's rarely you get him to put him on the spot. Throw me a different question, I'll give you one.
Sorry, Billy.
Yeah.
In terms of UGL and interaction with parents, so from the number of schools I have always spoken to, one of the issues that parents find is how they're communicated with from the school environment. But the school don't have the man hours to be able to sort of be phoning parents constantly or writing emails to them, whatever the case may be. How do you manage that in your school?
I think it's about understanding that the level of communication that I'm able to give to the community or the parents in general has to be directly correlated to the level of need of the child. So for example, the simple line would be if you take with 3 special classes. Again, I always say that like we don't use the word unit, the word unit should never be used. There's special classes, that's all they are. But the 3 classes we have, those 18 kids have 6 SNAs and 4.5 teachers, right? Among those 18 kids. It is absolutely appropriate that those parents expect a call every day. That level of student to staffing, that level of communication is appropriate if needed. For a child who's in a general second year class without complex needs, maybe doesn't have a student support file, the level of communication will look different there. It will be tutor, it will be year head, and the parental expectation needs to be managed if it's disproportionate. So you're always looking at where the child is on the continuum, what the level of need is, and the level of communication has to match that. But you still drop the ball. We've been dealing with a complex situation with second years lately, and you're trying to do everything and you can, okay, so every parent being got a phone call. I want them to be called, not emailed. And you're constantly trying to up the ante, but the level of complexity should correlate to the level of communication. Would be our, not saying we do it all the time right though, like we try. We're just very, and we're very, like I had one of the most amazing moments with my staff recently when we came back after, was it midterm, and I wasn't straight after the midterm break, and I was in there by 8 o'clock and I was standing outside my office in the foyer, and she said, oh my God, I made a really big mistake. Oh my God, I forgot to do something and something big is happening tomorrow, and I told no one except the people. Do you know when you have that moment where you realise, oh my God, and next thing there was a deputy beside me and there was 2 8 post holders. And I went, oh my God, I just made a mistake. And one of the 8 post holders says, no, hold on there now, I'm going to beat you, I made a bigger one. No, I made a bigger mistake. And one by one, the 4 of us owned up to 4 mistakes we made, and we decided to evaluate who messed up the most, right? And how are we going to solve it and navigate it? But it was the safest space to fall down. And that's what inclusion looks like, it's just for us as well. It's a safe space to fall down, and we solved them together, and we decided Darren won because there was 30 kids outside waiting for a bus and there was no bus. He had immediacy, I had 12 hours to solve my problem, so he absolutely won the box of chocolates. But part of it is the safety to fail, and being able to fail, and for parents to let us as schools fail. Doesn't mean our heart's not in the right place, but if you meet us with an attack, we get defensive, and if we meet you with an attack, you get defensive. So it's finding that space to meet where actually we're all on the one side. And I know I say it a lot in parent meetings, I know what love looks like. And sometimes love looks angry, and sometimes it looks annoyed with schools, and sometimes the car door is still open. But that's all valuable, and never underestimate the importance of your role in our schools, and secondly, especially at second level. Really hard to get you in. Like, it is hard to get parents involved at second level. So again, it's anything else we can do, always talk to us and let us know.
What did you make in respect of the autism classes as opposed to special classes is really well named, because you described a very, very good teacher ratio and SNA access and provision. That's actually not available in the moderate classroom.
What do you mean?
Moderate classroom is 8 to 1.
Yeah.
0.5 of an SNA.
Yeah. And again,
and that they in the continuum of support which you're articulating, the parent needs to be able to receive information in a really, really timely manner in respect to those particular children, because it's the greatest support for the greatest need, and those children are the greatest need, requiring the greatest support, and that has to be regularized. That the child in the moderate unit gets the exact same pupil-teacher ratio and the exact same access to special needs assistance as the child in the ASD.
And I don't disagree about, and again, my challenge is I don't have the space. I'd have every classroom opened. I'd open them up because I'm limited to 3 because I have no space and capacity. But it also, what's very interesting, and this is a bit of a boring thing, but it's more principle based, but what I find really interesting is the relationship between my special class allocation and how I manage that, and the relationship between my SAT allocation, and they support each other. And sometimes well, actually that kid's getting a lot of in-class support as well there, so we can use 2 hours of that there for communication, and there is a relationship there once I can manage the hours. But I suppose all my our AS classes I haven't went down, I haven't had the capacity, I'd open all of them, but so there is a challenge with proportionality, and primary would say the same. They have a different ratio for special classes, but the man with the ears and the power, and if we go down the Lundy model, the power to make influence is hearing, so, I don't know if you want to come in on that.
Message is well listened to.
Yeah.
Heard.
Yeah, but I think it's also, second level schools are in a massive state of flux with special classes. And the big challenge for us is to make sure we don't create a special school within a mainstream school. Is that we make sure we're not creating those segregation spaces, and we look at how we make sure we're doing proper integration. And like my 3rd class had no classroom, I didn't want a classroom. I wanted the resources but no classroom. So I said, because actually they're integrating to mainstream most of the time, the 1.5 teachers and the 2 SNAs was what I needed. I didn't need another room because they're going to be in mainstream all the time, but they needed complex support in mainstream. So it's about we find our ways, and some schools like yours and ours, that we will keep navigating and trying, but we're also good at, you know, making sure we're navigating and trying, because then we can say to people like the boss, we need a bit more. And he listened because he knows we're working and trying. And I think part of that is a conversation, and your voice is just as important.
Sorry, just to say
Yeah.
there, I mean, I would say most schools are trying their best, you know, but here you have a fantastic example of how it's actually really working. It'd be lovely to see, like your school or school here, looked as a case study to talk to other principals who genuinely are really trying their best. As you said there, in a post-primary school, you're looking at, not talking about one teacher, looking at how they can deal with that child and help them to understand. We're talking about numerous teachers all across trying to do the same program.
But they, I mean, and you know, the ETB, the JMB, they're all doing really good work at getting us to share.
Yeah.
But we're all time poor.
Yeah.
Like, we're very good, we say anyone who wants to come on in ahead, should we brought John and Helen in, and you know, we're very good at opening the door and saying, well, like, we're in an old building, we're in a tiny little primary school, we're, you know, it's like a fun size, we're like the box of heroes equivalent of the school. Like, I walk out here and I'm going, oh my god, I'm so jealous. But we just make do. That's what schools are doing. It's just some of us, we you know, we just make do in a slightly different way. But I think we are, you know, I know you open the door here all the time. There's loads of people coming and visiting the schools. So I think we all do it in our own way. Educate Together, we do it in a way that's sometimes quite educate together-y, and then sometimes it's with the wider system.
And I think the NCSE has been very
Oh,
good
yeah.
around giving opportunities for us to share our practices with one another. I think there's nothing more powerful than its principles speaking of the positive impact that special classes have on the culture of your school. And I think the NCSE has a really good respect of that space.
Yeah, and it does, because schools should look like the rest of the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So schools should look like what you eat in Tesco. You know, or Super Value or Lidl or all the other supermarkets. Sorry, online. I didn't online. Sorry, I'm getting in trouble. Yeah.
First of all, I want to say thank you to you and to everybody else, and to the boss,
John.
John, who has spoken here today. I'm coming here from the point of view of a parent, but also as an educator, and in our own way, we are all educators. But I've had a journey recently with education where I have worked in secondary school, I've worked in primary school, but I've gone back working in early years. And I think until now, I don't know if there's any parents here, even though in the NPC is now inclusive of parents, which is great to see, early years, primary school, post-primary school. But I think, and the reason I've gone back learning and studying about all this is that we really need to go back to basics. And where I'm teaching at the moment, I have quite a number of children who are, they're challenged within themselves. So we're trying to find ways as educators to support them, but also to support the parents.
I know, and again, the most important thing is once we're all in it together,
Yeah.
and we have reasonable expectations of each other, you know, sometimes the dilemmas we face at school is like standing in a hole. The most important thing is if I come across a child who's standing in a hole is to get into the hole with them. And come on ahead, parents, and we'll all get in the hole together and we'll work out how to get out of the hole. But there's no point in standing outside the hole and saying, what you do in the hole, child? How did you fall? You're in the hole. Sometimes you just get in, oh, sure, look it. Turn the corner and you didn't even see it in there. We normalise it and we navigate it and we do it as a collective group of staff with the outside agencies. I know just had Fiona in, we're part of the new Behaviour for Learning. We have Fiona in and helping us. She was in last week from the NCSE. And again, it was another perspective. We had a brilliant day, really interesting questions, reminding us what we're doing well and going, well, that's not, you know, do you need to look at that, that and that? And I go, yes, I do. And yes, thanks for the guidance. And here's a few bits to nudge you along. And we get nudged along and suddenly there's a new piece of work. Sometimes that's all we need is a nudge. And the nudge can be for schools getting a nudge from a parent getting a nudge from the schools, kids getting nudges from us all. And I think it's that collective bit that, and I think universal design for learning really helps it. So, thank you very much for your time.